morning to you. Welcome back. This is the Morning Cafe show only on TV47. I am Shiksha Arora. With me in studio, I have James Odongo, the Chief Executive Officer at the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization that is known as KEPRO. And of course, right here, we are going to be talking about recycling, the impact of recycling on the public. And of course, here in Kenya, when it comes to something that I've seen that has been taken very controversially, it is the color-coded bins. So we'll also be getting into that and how crucial it is to actually ensure that we package our products well, we make sure that they aren't hazardous when it comes to manufacturing as well. And just, I feel like there's a 360 effect that this will have for the future, for the future generations as well. What we do now, the actions that we have and the things that we take, these steps that we take to ensure that we are being eco-friendly will affect the generations to come. Definitely. So let's get right into that conversation. Asante sana, James, for coming into studio and just being a part of this conversation as we talk about sustainability. And we can start off by you briefly telling us what the Extended Producer Responsibility Regulations are, what the EPR Regulations are, and their significance, and really the motivation behind the gazettement of these regulations.
Okay, thank you very much, Shiksha. So just to set context before we delve into the conversation is to say a little bit more about KEPRO.
Yes.
KEPRO, as you've rightly put it, the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization, is an entity that was established by visionary leaders who wanted to disrupt the theory that had been long adopted, where it was all about profits for businesses. And in this case, the assumption or the decision for these business leaders was that businesses now need to take responsibility for the environmental consequences of their products. And of course, it was a lead up to various activities that had, or rather, a culmination of various events. Back in 2017, there was a ban on the single-use plastic carrier bags. And so the government, and of course in partnership with private sector, agreed that moving forward producers would be taking more proactive roles as far as the environmental stewardship in Kenya is concerned. And one such tool is extended producer responsibility, which primarily is a policy approach that requires that producers are either taking partial or full responsibility for the environmental impacts of their products. So here you're talking about either operational, design responsibility, or even financial responsibility. Coming closer home, of course, this was a more predominant policy approach in the global north.
Right.
But we are seeing some good uptake in the global south. South Africa made it mandatory in 2021. Kenya, of course, being one of the most ambitious countries in the world, has now mandated extended producer responsibility for all products coming into the Kenyan market. And the idea is that now producers will be required at point of importation to make certain payments as a legal requirement. So just to also clarify, the EPR regulations are anchored on the Sustainable Waste Management Act. Section 13 of the Act says that all producers introducing a product into the Kenyan market must take EPR responsibility for their products. So that's where we are at. Of course, the regulations have long been coming. There was partial implementation of the Act, but now the regulations have given effect to the whole Act. So earlier this month, that was on November 4th, the National Environment Management Authority, of course, in partnership with the Mother Ministry, gazetted the EPR regulations, so fully effecting implementation of EPR in Kenya.
Thank you very much for that, James. Now, when we talk about EPR regulations and how they will affect, these regulations will affect Kenyans' lives on a day-to-day basis. So what exactly does this mean for an ordinary Kenyan citizen?
Okay, for an ordinary Kenyan citizen, and we have been told to try and use language that easily resonates with
layman's language.
Exactly, with the common mananchi, is that that bottle of soda that you're using at home, whichever form of packaging, whether it's a sugar packaging or whatever, now there's now that requirement that there is concerted efforts between the consumer and the producer to ensure that the same is rather properly disposed, and there is very minimal environmental impacts resulting from the utilization of such product. So when you read the Sustainable Waste Management Act jointly with the EPR regulations, there are certain requirements that are placed heavily on the producer But of course, at KEPRO level and within the value chain actors level, there's that agreement that the consumer also plays a critical role.
Absolutely.
So we've coined a term called the extended consumer responsibility, where we're saying, Shiksha, at home, you need to dispose of your waste properly. The first step, of course, is looking at you placing the waste in the bin.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, we have been brought up in a culture where it's okay to dispose of waste
on the
from
roads,
exactly
on the streets.
Exactly. So the first entry point for us is that the consumer needs to first be aware that they need to put it in the bin. Then the next phase of that discussion goes to putting it in the right bin. So segregation of waste at source. You've had the ministry recently talking about a gazettement of the color-coded bins and the likes. So that is the intention, where we're saying the consumer must also take responsibility as far as disposal of waste in the right bin is concerned.
Okay.
Because as ironical as it may sound, and being that KEPRO has been in operation since 2021, we've been working with recyclers. And
does it make their life easier? Because, you know, when you have color-coded bins, for instance, or when you're disposing the waste in a responsible way, does it help recyclers and does it help waste collectors do their job better?
Yes. And sort of what I was alluding to is that we've been working with recyclers since 2021. And the ironical statement they make is that we are not getting adequate volumes to our facilities. Yet when you walk around, there's actual litter all over. So yes, the first step is actually what you do at home, at work, and whichever place you are disposing of your waste. The immediate point where you dispose of your waste as mixed waste, where you're combining both food waste, plastic, carton, and whatever, the separation process is only adding more bottlenecks to the recycling process. In addition to that, we need to understand that the recycling process does not necessarily have significant margins from a profit generation point of view. So you adding the complexity of us having to wash the waste in our processing lines only adds to the production cost, and that dissuades recyclers from taking certain volumes, especially where waste is not being segregated at home or at our businesses and any of the other facilities we live in. Yes.
Right now, James, when we talk about these EPR regulations moving forward, what are some of the changes that we will be seeing? And what are some of the things that will be done that have not been implemented before, but moving forward, we will see them being implemented and we will see a change?
Okay. Of course, first we need to recognize that the EPR regulations are generally going to be very disruptive. For the first time ever, producers are going to be required to take care of the environmental consequences of their products. Because for the longest time, the idea was, as a producer, I produce my bottle or my packaging.
Does that mean higher costs of production?
In some scenarios, yes, unfortunately. But in some scenarios, because of course EPR has been implemented in a voluntary manner since 2018 in Kenya. So in some lines, the cost will be absorbed by the producers. But in some scenarios, we are seeing that, unfortunately, the cost will be transferred to the end consumer. So one is, that is the first thing that we are going to be seeing in the coming future. The other bit is that you're going to now see lesser products that are difficult to recycle. So we are going to be seeing more eco-friendly products come into the market from a packaging, at least from a packaging point of view, from where I speak from.
So less plastic?
Yes, potentially less plastic, but we also must also be very careful not to
generalize it.
Exactly, and by getting to the politics or schematics of plastics is bad. The reality is mismanagement of plastic is what is bad. As long as the product is recyclable, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that there is a lot of efforts towards recycling plastic. And of course, the plastic is also feeding into a certain need within the ecosystem as far as consumers are concerned. The last thing from an EPR point of view is that there is hope for behavioral shift. So first, from the aspect of consumer behavior as to how they handle waste. The second thing is we are potentially going to see a new group of work consumers who are eco-conscious, being very deliberate to buy products and have affinity for products that are actually eco-friendly, and of course having recycled content within their production processes.
And how exactly is KEPRO planning to support producers in this particular context?
So The law provides for two approaches to comply with the provisions of the Sustainable Waste Management Act. One, if a producer feels that they have the financial, technical and operational muscle to be able to institute EPR mechanisms by themselves,
right,
they can implement what we call the individual compliance scheme. So abstractly using TV47 as a production house, TV47 might say we have presence in all the 47 counties, we have the financial resources and technical capacity to collect and recycle our waste. We'll go individual. But because in most scenarios, producers are not in the business of handling waste, they look for what we call the collective compliance scheme. So KEPRO is the leading compliance scheme in Kenya for packaging for non-hazardous products. Here we are handling various packaging, including plastics, glass, paper, carton, as well as aluminum, and any other multi-layered forms of plastics or packaging. So being that we have already been in the industry from a voluntary point of view since 2021 actually,
okay.
We have already acquired the necessary expertise and instituted the required structures for us to be able to comply with the law. So the idea is that we currently are managing compliance solutions for around 890 companies in Kenya. Here we are looking at issues around end-of-life management of their post-consumer products. Here you're talking about the various fractions I talked about. Of course, producers will also be required to submit certain documents showing compliance.
Yes.
So we do this on behalf of the producers.
Okay.
The other requirement from an EPR point of view, and this requirement is directly placed on the producer, is a bit about awareness and trying to inculcate interdependent behavior change. So KEPRO has heavily invested in that, trying to speak to consumers. So taking advantage of such platforms, both digital and mainstream media, to pass out the message that you need to handle your waste properly. You actually, as an individual, play a very critical role as far as environmental stewardship is concerned. So such solutions are what we are coming in to offer as a producer responsibility organization in Kenya.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Now let's talk about the fact that we are going to be seeing some changes in the near future when it comes to the EPR regulations, right?
Yes.
And what challenges do you foresee in the near future with regards to Kenya's waste management, which we do know is very diverse, right?
Yes.
Do you see any challenges that could potentially arise in the near future?
Definitely.
And how exactly do you think that KEPRO is going to address these challenges?
Definitely. So the first and almost obvious challenge is a slow uptake.
Yeah.
From a producer point of view, you'll be noticing that EPR requires some sort of financial commitment. And so in most cases, you'll notice that producers will feel that this is another hit to my P&L from a profit and loss point of view. So we see some laxity in terms of uptake with respect to compliance with EPR regulations.
Right.
The other thing, but of course this will be addressed through continuous awareness and making them aware that they need to future-proof their businesses.
Okay.
Because even from a global point of view, we are seeing INC and the Global Plastics Treaty come into play with quite some punitive or rather restrictive suggestions with respect to environmental stewardship by producers. The other thing that we see as a challenge is that Kenya's waste ecosystem is largely informal. So here we are working with informal reclaimers and other waste actors. And then them being integrated into product stewardship programs is usually quite a challenge, because the success of any EPR scheme or any product stewardship program is heavily hinged on material and financial traceability. So when a waste picker comes in and says, I've collected this amount of waste, then we need to be able to verify that they're actually not coming in to declare post-industrial waste. They're actually collecting what is required by law as post-consumer waste. When we are making payments to them, there are issues on compliance from KRA's requirement, E-teams and the likes. So these informal actors don't necessarily have such provisions, and this might be a challenge for us to be able to integrate them into that value chain.
Okay.
Finally, the other major challenge I see, top of my mind, is a bit about consumer involvement.
Yeah.
So we've been brought up predominantly in a very bad culture, where it's okay to dispose of your waste, litter from whichever place you are. So that will also take time. We've seen some countries it's taken up to 30 years just to try and ensure that that behavior change is taking place. So this will also be taking a bit of time.
Because I also remember when President Uhuru Kenyatta got rid of plastic bags.
Yes, yes.
That particular move and that particular law was taken in a very negative way.
Exactly.
In the beginning, especially.
Yes, yes.
When you look at the grassroots, you know, you have the Mama Boga,
sure.
you have the shopkeepers.
Yes,
they were taken aback because
yes.
they were like, this is going to disrupt our business
yes.
completely. So yes, you're right. I feel like the consumers have a huge role to play.
Definitely.
And how exactly are you educating these consumers? I do know that KEPRO has a consumer learning and transformation program throughout the entire year.
Yes, yes.
How exactly are you continuously creating awareness and passing around information with regards to this new regulations? And how important is education in the success and the implementation of the EPR regulation?
Yes, yes. So earlier this year when we were drafting our 4-year strategy, we were in the process of mapping out our primary stakeholders and of course trying to build our business model canvas.
Yes.
And the predominant actor was emerging as a consumer. And we therefore agreed that the consumer is a primary stakeholder within the value chain, because the process of recycling or of taking of waste starts at point of disposal. So we came up with a program we're calling the consumer-led transformation. This is a 3-year, or rather 3-phase program, with the first phase being more of trying to encourage interdependent behavior change amongst consumers. So the idea is that we're imparting them with knowledge to make them understand that they need to have that agency feeling where they are the biggest environmental stewards. So we've been able to do this across close to 40 counties this year alone, having interacted with both members of the public and other waste value chain actors, including county government officials. And the idea is not only to impart them with that knowledge, but also trigger social dialogues around really what is ailing our environment within our neighborhoods, within our counties. What can we do better? Because in some scenarios, we can actually use more adaptable solutions as opposed to trying to borrow certain ideas such as EPR. So we can have EPR being implemented at very adaptable forms compared to trying to replicate what has been done outside the country. So that is the intention of the consumer-led transformation. And of course, besides town hall sessions and physical meetings, we've also been heavy on trying to take advantage of digital and mainstream media, so working with different media houses and media personalities, as well as, of course, digital media platforms, to try and put out this message that you and I actually play a critical role.
Absolutely.
And that's why you've seen our tagline as being my wastes, my responsibility. Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Now, James, how exactly has KEPRO aligned its responsibility and just trying to get all the stakeholders to align with regards to this particular plans and the EPR regulations? You know, you have waste collectors, you have recyclers, you also have government agencies, you've also mentioned the media has a crucial role, the consumers all have a role as well that they play. So how exactly are you planning to just make sure that everyone is aligned with the plans that you have in future?
Okay. So interestingly, one of our core values, or two of our core values, are community and collaboration. So for everything we do as KEPRO, it must be towards impacting the community in a positive way. Of course, here you're talking about environmental conservation and protection of the environment. The other thing is on collaboration. So we don't believe in reinventing the wheel. So here we say, instead of KEPRO coming in and installing its own recycling facilities, why not empower company XYZ that is already doing recycling? We come and assess your production process, say you're currently doing 60 tons. How can we be able to scale it up to get to 100 tons per month? We do some sort of grant injection to be able to increase the capacities of these recyclers. Of course, with other agencies such as the government, we have to closely work together from a collaboration point of view to ensure that we are first not only locking out who we call the free riders according to the EPR regulations. So these are producers who want to join KEPRO but are not actually doing the obligations as required by law and fulfilling what is required by KEPRO. So working jointly with NEMA and other agencies from a government side, we're able to weed out these producers and, of course, take up corrective measures. One such corrective measure is what we call the assisted compliance. So jointly working with NEMA producers and seeing what are the challenges you're facing that dissuades you from complying, and then we get to work around such solution. We've also gotten into partnerships and, of course, signed quite a number of MOUs with different actors. We have the Kenya Alliance of Residents Associations, because we also want to bring the messaging closer home to your residential or neighborhood associations, Institute of Packaging Professionals of Kenya, because we also understand that the design element of a product ultimately determines how well it can be handled at post-consumption stage. So those are some of the interventions we have been able to undertake to ensure collaboration and partnership within the value chain actors.
Great, brilliant.
Yes.
James, as we approach 2025,
Yes.
What exactly is KEPRO's strategic priorities for the near future, rather, for next year, especially when it comes to advancing the EPR agenda, firstly, and also how exactly is KEPRO going to ensure that they continue to foster, a circular economy here in the country? So what are some strategic plans for that particular, when it comes to that particular area?
I think from a KEPRO standpoint, we believe that the future is luminous. We started as a voluntary scheme, got into a semi-voluntary scheme, and now that the law requires that everyone should be on board, we only believe that it's just but a start. The reality or the details of what our strategic initiatives are, I may not be able to delve into all that, but one thing that we pride ourselves in is that we are an organization that has been able to move the conversation from lip service to actual implementation of environmental stewardship program. So since 2021 to date, we've been able to collect and recycle over 20,000 metric tons of post-consumer waste. Yes. And so you can imagine if that was in a voluntary ecosystem, then what...
now when the law is in place and there's regulations.
So there's significant potential for us to be able to more than double that within the next 2-3 years. The other key priority area for us is trying to encourage interdependent behavior change amongst consumers, because we believe as long as Shiksha James puts their waste in the right bin, then we'll have solved 90% of Kenya's waste problem. Yes.
Okay, brilliant. And of course, as we further talk about the responsibility that each and every individual has, what would you like to tell people who are watching who still kind of struggle with kind of making eco-friendly decisions, who still struggle with sustainability because that's not a culture that they're used to, and that is something that it's not something that they've grown up with, and their beliefs are very different when it comes to the environment. So what exactly would you like to tell such a person on what the first step is to moving towards an eco-friendly environment? And I think I'll quote one of these famous quotes where the biggest folly every other citizen can try to imagine is that it's someone else's responsibility to protect our environment. Or sometimes I also think that, you know, when you are on the streets, you're walking, or when you're just in a park, for instance, or in a forest as well, you see some sort of litter, and you just keep walking. You leave it there because you're like, I'm not the one who littered.
It's not my responsibility.
It's not my responsibility to pick it up.
But now my call to action to our viewers and any other person who will be watching this is that the first step is really just putting it in the bin. It doesn't have to be rocket science. Yes, I know we are moving to the national color-coded bins and the likes, but the first step is actually putting it in the bin. You'll have solved more than 50% of our problems. Try and ensure that we are putting it in the bin. I know we usually want to have excuses around, oh, there's no adequate bins or something, but the reality is, even in your house, if there's no bin, you'll be able to figure out how to place it in the right place.
So that you don't litter in your own house.
Yes. And so it's as practical as just first putting it in the right bin. We'll come later on and have the conversation around putting it in the respective bins for recycling and recyclables and the like. Yes.
All right. Now, James, how exactly do you see the EPR regulations changing Kenya's waste management landscape in the coming few years? What do you think that will happen in the next few years that will really benefit us as a country in becoming more environmentally friendly?
So in the immediate future, we are going to be seeing disruptive innovations, trying to find more sustainable solutions from product and packaging sectors. But the other thing that we see is a lot of research and development will be coming into the sector, not only from a design for recyclability point of view, but even from other principles of circularity, so reduction, reuse, and the likes. We have also seen over the last few years, and we expect that this will more than double, is the increased investments in the recycling value chain. So there's been significant interest in the progress that Kenya has made.
Yes.
Both from a regional and even from a global point of view. I think we are among the first few countries to be able to fully adopt EPR and embed it in law. So that has created some sort of excitement from both local and international players to come in and invest in the recycling value chain. So we're also going to be seeing more jobs being created within the ecosystem, a lot of investments going into both the machinery and the human resource capacity needed to ensure that Kenya is accelerating its recycling rates.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And James, how exactly are we going to be measuring the success of the EPR regulations? In the sense, what milestones can we look at just to know that the EPR regulations program is actually being successful, it is fruitful? So what will you be looking at to kind of measure the success?
Okay. And of course, allow me to first demystify the perception that EPR is coming as a holy grail, coming to solve everything.
Coming in as a hero.
Exactly. That is not the case. It will only be addressing post-consumer waste and more specifically dry waste.
Yes.
Now, to your question as to what we are going to be working with as metrics of... one of the requirements for producers is a declaration on what they are putting into the market per year or per month.
Okay.
So that would be one of the key indicators. So measuring the POM, the put on market volumes vis-a-vis what has been collected and recycled. So presently, while the figure is not necessarily verifiable to date, is that we're estimating our recycling rates to be anywhere between 9 to 15%. So of course, by law, the authority, the National Environment Management Authority, will be setting what we are calling the national targets for recycling. So that will be used to measure the progress of EPR, because EPR will be the primary entity or policy approach mandated with checking off the metrics for recycling in Kenya. So issues around the volumes that have been recycled, and really the knowledge and perception around waste amongst the general public. So if we'll be seeing more better disposal habits coming over the years, that would be also a good indicator to assess the effectiveness of EPR. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And James, as we wrap up, what other initiatives does KEPRO have to just further ensure that KEPRO is supporting not just the consumers, but also the producers in compliance and sustainability to ensure that the EPR regulations campaign and project is actually a success? So KEPRO is in quite a unique position, and potentially that is what has helped us cement our position and as industry leaders as far as EPR compliance is concerned. And we noticed that at some point, out of the 890 members, not everyone is legally obligated to be a member of the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization. And so we saw it needful to first address what is required by the members. Here we are talking about first the EPR compliance, but what else can we be able to check off that would interest them to go the extra mile as far as environmental stewardship is concerned. So we've introduced programs such as the KEPRO Innovation Hub or Accelerator Program. Here, the idea is to bring producers in one room, encourage knowledge sharing on what they're doing as far as product design is concerned, other product stewardship initiatives within the ecosystem and beyond Kenya are also discussed in such forums. From our partnership with the county governments, because we need to recognize that the County Governments Act of 2012 says that waste management is a devolved function, so we cannot work in silos or work without incorporating the efforts of the county government. So we are closely working together. Recently, we were working with both Kisumu
and Mombasa County to try and pilot segregation of waste at source programs.
And how did that go? How was the uptake?
The uptake has been good so far. Of course, it's something that we are still measuring and tracking. Very soon, we are also going to be signing an MOU with 2 other counties.
Okay.
Still speaking on consumer behavior change, but still, there is that requirement by law that they need to domesticate the Sustainable Waste Management Act, the county government. So we're also going to be working jointly with the county governments as a technical resource hub to be able to nurture and handhold them in designing their laws to ensure that they speak to the spirit of the National Sustainable Waste Management Act. Yeah,
okay.
Those are a few of the interventions we are working on to ensure that there's more beyond just compliance.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
Thank you very much, James, for coming here and giving us your time. We appreciate the fact that you are able to just give us some information and kind of expound on production and how exactly producers as well as consumers have a responsibility in waste management and recycling as well.
Thank you.
So yes, I'm sure if there's somebody who's watching at home, they will definitely make sure that they have that conscious effort to try and do better in terms of waste management.
Sure.
That is James Odongo from the Chief Executive Officer at the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization right here with us at TV47, the Morning Cafe Show, as we spoke about just recycling, waste management as a whole, and the EPR regulations that will be changing a few things in how you dispose your waste and how you have a responsibility in the near future of just making sure that you do things that are sustainable and environmentally friendly. That's it from me right now. Make sure you stay right here because TV47 will continue the entertainment. I have Tasty Wednesday upcoming, so do tune in for that. For me, that's it for now. I'll see you next week. Actually, tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. But yes, I do hope, James, that we continue to have such conversations in future. Just to make sure that I feel like the collective responsibility is not just for KEPRO.
Definitely.
It is for you and I. It is for you watching, every person who's watching this particular show right now. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for watching.